Hi, everyone. I'm Summer,
I'm Carrie.
and this is Hopoksia podcast.
I'm nervous.
Oh, don't be nervous. It'll be fun. Fuck. Oh my God. What the hell just happened? What the hell? What is happening? Make sure you come back. We're going to do this bi-weekly. So make sure you come back to talk to us more about, sex, drugs, and self-improvement.
Welcome back, y'all. Today we're joined by Mollie Murphy Tindle, who I will forever be indebted to for giving me the term decentralized cult. So today we're going to be talking about our experiences growing up in evangelicalism and our deconstruction of our faith and all of those fun things. Today we pick up where we left off. This is part 3 in our 3-part series about escaping evangelicalism. We pick up where we left off in the middle of our purity culture conversation with broaching the topic of compulsory monogamy. If you haven't heard the first 2 parts of this, I do encourage you to go back and start there so that you can hear the entirety of the conversation. I know it's long, but it's worth it unless you are my family. And again, I will reiterate my boundary of this series is not for you. Because there are some things that will likely be upsetting and there's no reason to create potential conflict when it's unnecessary. But please, for the rest of our audience, feel free to send us any questions you may have. We may elaborate in, later episodes, but we're always happy to talk about our experiences and how we're learning and growing from them. So, how hard was it for you guys to let go of the mandate of monogamy?
Extremely hard.
Really?
Times. It's hard to go from your whole life being like, I have to have my person, and this is gonna be my person. They're gonna be my best friend, and we're gonna do everything together, and it's gonna be happy, wonderful, and magical. To realizing that I can't be that for somebody else. I cannot be everything for somebody.
And I didn't want to be because it's not a healthy dynamic.
Emotionally exhausting.
That's what it took for me, was actually learning what healthy relationships look like and recognize. And I had a light bulb moment, and I was like, oh, so you can't, that's not a healthy relationship, and you can't force it into being a healthy relationship.
James and I were talking about this the other day too, because when you focus on monogamy in this way, it also is at the expense of a lot of other platonic, intimate relationships. Mm-hmm. James's best friend is not a partner of his, but they have been friends since they were 7 years old. They have a level of intimacy my partner, my spouse, and I will never have. Right. And that's good, because like you said, it's too much pressure. I can't do all of that. And it took a lot of conversations for a few years of James and I thinking about the be all end all, and me, I think it helped in that case to not have any prior experiences with anybody, because I wasn't always looking for the one person. There just was this one person, and then all of a sudden the illusion fell, and I couldn't be everything to this person because that was just way too much. And I was pushing him to make friends because I'm like, I can't do this for you all the time. You're an extrovert, but you require way too much of me. You need more people. So when we actually had the conversation about polyamory last year, we'd already been in a spot where we realized how both of us had so few options and experiences. We couldn't successfully be everything for each other. And that in order to have a good relationship, we needed to broaden our balance and not just be everything. And it's made everything a lot better. It doesn't mean it's not hard sometimes. It doesn't mean that polyamory and ethical non-monogamy aren't difficult at times, but our life is much more rewarding now.
So were you guys taught that God makes the one for you, and you have to, God will give you that one person.
And it's
That's a
only
common.
out in your town at your church. Where else?
Nowhere else.
I think that would have been considered like way too much like folklore. Like there wasn't scriptural backing for that. So no, that wasn't a real thing. A lot of people, some of the girls who went to college would meet their spouses through college. There were different levels of being allowed to go to schools and colleges at the churches that I grew up in. But a lot of people also just married people from the church. Not necessarily as young as my family did. Like we ended up on the much more fundamentalist end of things. And so that kind of like that young marriage was, even though my mom was like terrified of, you're not financially able to have kids just yet, but you need to get married, but you shouldn't get married, but you need to get married, but you shouldn't get married. And like did that whole back and forth forever. And you were just entirely confused by her. Like James will tell you, my spouse, the one girl that he had a crush on decided that she got a boyfriend in college and wasn't interested in him, and he was just like, well, there's no one else for me at this church, therefore I will be single my whole life.
Wow.
Even though he was in college at the time. And yeah, just really odd things. And so yeah, there's definitely that idea that you have to like pick a spouse from that group, or it's kind of odd if you didn't. Or like the couple groups, like there's a couple churches that interact, so you might be able to marry from a different church, but I call it it almost becomes a kind of incest, because these kids grew up together as like very good friends. There's often large families that have kids like the same grade levels, and my sister is married to my brother-in-law, James's brother, and I know a lot of other double married, which isn't anything wrong with it, but there are a lot of other double married families within these churches, and people that kind of grew up in the same environment getting married. So it feels almost incestuous.
And having to call each other like brother and sister in the church doesn't help.
That's a good point.
My grandma and her sister were double married to brothers. And so now I have like double second cousins, and it's weird to explain it to people. Because like our towns were so small. Like my grandparents, my grandma is from Smithville, Oklahoma, population of like 40 people, something there. So like when they got married, like there really like wasn't anybody else, so it was like they had to. But it is like really incestuous to like think about it, because you have to call your sister, and like especially in small town, like I'm raised with these people that I've known since like birth, basically, and like it's weird. Like I didn't want to do it, so everybody that I dated in high school was not from my hometown.
That makes sense.
From a different place that just moved there. So,
I think part of what makes it feel incestuous in the community I'm from, which again is in a large city but a small community, and you don't do anything outside that community. So it's basically a city of 350 people that live all over the metro area, but it's still its own like almost independent state as it exists. The part of what makes it feel incestuous is these are not people that are getting married and leaving like James and I did. Like there's very few people that leave. And so it also becomes a process of like vertical integration, because you have great grandparents and grandparents and parents and children, and then their kids after they get double married into these families, and they raise their kids in the same environments that they were raised in without question. Even if they've gone to college like most of the time, they still do this. Even if they've had a taste of freedom, a taste of the outside world, they find churches exactly like that. When they go to college, they find a spouse in those churches, they bring them back, they stay in the same circles. They might go to Evergreen Baptist instead of Tulsa Bible Church, but they're basically the same thing. And that's part of what frustrates me the most, is that these kids coming from people our age are never going to have a chance, because everybody they know is going to be there too. And in order to leave, they have to leave absolutely everyone they've ever spoken to before the age of 18 behind them. Yeah. There's no elders. There's no elders to look up to. There's none of their parents' friends who can help them if their parents pass and give them stories and comfort. They lose all of their friends. They don't speak to the people that were in their wedding. Yeah, but Carrie, like I said, it's basically a small state. It's a small city. Like it's the same thing.
It's really hard because like I when I finally stopped going to church in college, I pretty much lost like every single friend that I had at church, because once they figured out that I wasn't in church anymore, and I was a heathen out there having sex and like thinking that people that were gay were like pretty cool, you know, like doing that kind of stuff, like everybody just kind of dropped me. So I get it, like a little bit, not like the full aspect that you mentioned, but I get like parts of it. Because like my church, I think we had like 40, 50 people at my church, but there were so many churches, and we all went to like high school together, and we all hung out and stuff outside of school. So it was like our whole town was like that.
Yeah.
But it was really hard, and like I don't really talk to anybody from my hometown anymore, because after I left the church, like I just didn't see the point in it, and they didn't want anything to do with me anyway. So like, why would I try? And it sucked because I lost so many people from my life. I think I still talk to maybe like 3 people from that part of my life, maybe. No, I like it. It is hard. I totally get
It
it.
makes you feel like you lose your history because there's not anybody to hold it for you. Sometimes.
100%.
Oh, and here we are, the heretics.
Or as Grace Baldridge / Sumler would call us, the late bloomers and prodigal girls.
Yes.
No. I don't wanna. I want to be out here living my heathen life.
Oh, live your best heathen life. You know who we haven't mentioned? Pat Robertson.
Oh, fuck him.
Thank you. I just needed to hear that. I need to hear that at least once a day. You know, because I've been watching people on the internet, you know, post his videos of the last few years, you know, since Trump administration on, and they go on and on about, oh, he's senile, and it drives me crazy. I really, like, it almost sends me into a rage when they want to, like, oh, he's just senile. No! He's been saying this shit for decades. Like, this is the most on brand he's ever been.
Right.
Like, this is the teaching that has been happening.
That's why I've been talking about my experiences a lot more on my Facebook page, like with my Facebook friends. Sometimes it's weird it feels in like some ways like I'm oversharing, because this is also like leads to like my mental health struggles and the fact that I basically have broken down since I left, like since I graduated college, and like, but at the same time it's like you realize this isn't just my individual life, but this is infiltrating everywhere. My friend's mom, who is no longer comfortable at her church but still goes because she's been there for 50 years, she's not very comfortable a lot of the time. She believes very differently from people, and she also kind of calls people out on it sometimes. You know, she does not like white Christian nationalism, but a lot of her church does. And it's really interesting to see how these dividing lines fall. But like you said, people are like, oh, this is new. And you're like, no, it's not. So that's why I keep talking. It's not just because it feels good sometimes to say, I'm hurting. It's because, and then other people are like, I'm hurting too, and you find that community. It's also because this stuff is directly impacting where we're at now with Russia and Ukraine, and the conversations about Russian Christian nationalism and U.S. Christian nationalism, and how a lot of U.S. Christian nationalists are calling out Russia for being Christian nationalists when they are themselves a white Christian nationalist nation and people.
Let's see, what else? Have we missed any of the major points?
Mental health, sexuality, gender, purity culture, politics, school. You guys talked about how much your church impacted your school. That is really interesting.
Right. We didn't homeschool. We went to public school. I have noticed now in the intervening years, it has become more popular to have these small private Christian schools based at the churches. When I went to law school, because I homeschooled my kids, my older two, not for religious reasons, but because my oldest son is autistic and he would have drowned if I put him in the public school. And so I homeschooled them until I went to law school in 2010. So when I'm getting ready to go to law school, I start looking for schools to put them in. I did not want to put them in. They were going to have to stay with my parents because I had just left my husband. So I didn't have a place to stay. I thought I was going to have to live in my van. So my kids were going to stay with my parents. I'm like, they cannot go to the school to the school you're in their district. That's the school I graduated from. They cannot go there. So I started looking for schools for them to go to. And I tell you what, I went to some of those private Christian schools, and they were scary as fuck. Okay, they were awful, terrifying. Several of them, we're Choctaw, so we, traditionally keep our hair long. They would not have that. There was a lot of shaming, like even just in the interview where you would go to inquire, there would be a lot of shaming about the boys having long hair, and yeah, a lot of craziness. And so I went to college. I was told, my parents taught me to go to college because they did break away from the patriarchal idea. Dad was very much more traditional Choctaw in that you are not to depend on another person to support you. His reasoning was less feminist and more just, people buy. You have to be able to take care of yourself. Very much more practical. And so I went to college, and they encouraged me to go to college. But then, the more I learned, then you're shamed for getting educated, because education takes you away from God, right? Oh, you're getting so smart now, you think you can question what we believe, and the further I went in going into more advanced education, then it was just then it's met with derision, right? Oh, she just keeps going to school. She just, I don't know what all they said when I was not in the room, because they said plenty when I was there, but yeah. I'm going to hell for having a tattoo, so we're good. It's fine.
Yeah, my grandpa.
That was said at our family Christmas.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. How about you, Carrie? How did it affect your school?
My sex ed was ran by somebody from one of the churches.
Oh,
that was traumatizing. We prayed before every single football game and after every single football game. We had FCA.
I forgot about that.
Every Sunday night. It was the whole town of Bardwell is pretty religious. So it was just part of everyday life. I remember being in my youth group, and we would take the bus to Walmart or something, and they would give us those little pamphlets, or the ones that look like the dollar bills, and tell us to go give them to people.
The tracts.
And
have
the tracts. Conversations with people about this. I can't think of a way that it didn't impact any part of my life at home, because it was just ingrained in every single part of it. I remember my youth pastor, I missed church a couple of times because I was sick. He and the pastor from the church came to my house to make sure that I was going to be at church as soon as I was feeling better, because I had missed already, and God was upset with me that I had missed. Excuse me. I'm sick.
Oh my God, I totally forgot about that. I remember we had it used to be my job, we would write postcards to everybody who missed church. Yep. And send it to them, which didn't occur to me at the time. Why are you harassing these people? They have a right to not go to church on Sunday if they want to. But it didn't occur to me at the time, because it was presented to us as a way of showing that we care and letting them know we missed them.
We had a fellowship program too for as you said, Molly, the young ladies.
Yes.
Of the church. The older ladies of the church, we had these little mailboxes that they made for us, and they would write letters for us every week and leave us little gifts, encouraging us to come to church, or telling us what we did good that week. or if they noticed us doing something nice, they would leave us notes.
Wow.
It was a
We
lot.
are watching you.
They would leave us notes, like if they saw us out, like at the store or out in the community, they would leave us notes in our mailbox saying they saw us.
That's freaky. That's really freaky. Yeah.
And they like
stalking
I
you.
remember my grandparents. Like my grandparents they were a big part of the community for a long time because my grandpa was a Sunday school teacher for the boys, and my grandma did Sunday school teaching for the girls back in like the 90s or 80s or something. So they knew everybody. And so everybody in town at the church like learned my car and would tell my parents where I was.
Oh
if
my gosh.
I was supposed to be, I would get in so much trouble. So it really was just part of like my everyday life. Could not get away from it in town.
So since I was homeschooled, it was obviously a huge part of that. My parents decided to homeschool for religious reasons. Later, I got through a conversation with my mom, she confessed, we didn't really care about academics. We just wanted you to be home for religious reasons. We wanted you to be a close family and love God and be in your church and, you know, good academics, whatever. Like, this is important. So my mom started homeschooling me when I was like 4 or 5. I have an adopted brother from Russia that has fetal alcohol syndrome. So they had him in the local Christian schools. Speaking of local small Christian schools, this one started in the late 1970s, 1980s. Nothing to do with integration. No, we won't say anything about that. White flight schools. So Jackson's been in this one through 6th grade, and then my parents brought him home. It was put my family in a lot of debt, even with scholarships and help. He needed some special help with his education, and there's a lot I could talk about with like the problems with not having trauma-informed parenting for adopted kids and for kids with special needs and for their siblings as well, because even the ones that are labeled neurotypical, when you're in that kind of system where you're treated as an adult in order required to basically help, like have everything roll off your back, you have no ability to have emotions, basically. So that's a whole conversation. But the homeschooled side, like we were super into Vision Forum, which is a patriarchal Christian dominionist subgroup of like the Quiverful movement, kind of connected to ATI and IBLP, kind of independent fundamentalist Baptist, kind of not, just kind of this bridge of a bunch of different groups. They sold books and CDs and DVDs and children's toys, heavily gendered, all of them. My parents got into Chef, which was Christian Home Educator Fellowship, and its Bible verse was literally like as arrows in the hand of a mighty man. So heavily quiverful, a lot of ATI, IBLP, Free Will Baptist influence in that organization. And that is how they structured a lot of their, my mom especially structured a lot of our social interactions with co-ops early on through there. So it was constant. My mom quote the verse a lot when they sit down and wake up and rise up, in that verse from Proverbs, like let it be all around them. So heavily gendered as far as like chores and what we did and what we were expected to do. You know, I still don't think my brother knows how to clean a bathroom. My sister is 2 years down, would not really help with dinner. So that was on me. So I learned all the household skills to the point where when I was 16 and James asked my dad if he could court me, my dad said, yeah, she's pretty much, basically synopsis, she's pretty much ready to have a family. So yeah, that's fine.
That's a lot of pressure at 16.
Yeah. I was a month from 17, but it's still a fucking lot of pressure.
That's a lot.
She's about breeding age now. Go ahead and take her.
Exactly.
What the hell?
The part of it is like, I didn't know anything about anything. My mom told me about periods. I was terrified. My body changed without my knowledge. She didn't talk to me about a whole lot. So it changed without my consent even. Like I felt like everything in my life was unstable and betraying me about my body and there wasn't an ability to talk about it because it made her uncomfortable and because we weren't supposed to talk about it with any friends because it was supposed to be very hush hush, because what if another girl finds out about this without her mother telling her, and how terrible and embarrassed my mother would be about that. And so you lose all these support systems except your family. And it's very much like the way that emotional abusers isolate their victims. It's very much how this structure operates. And I know that there's great homeschooling, and I know there's people that homeschool for great reasons, even if some of those are religious, like my friend in Kansas who homeschools her 4 kids. But they do a lot of like questions and answers and looking at different aspects of the world. And anyways, that's the whole thing. But this particular method, which is very much in that 1980s, 1990s Homeschool Legal Defense Association method, Michael Ferris and all that, like, it's really traumatizing. It's a great way to either breed robots or to breed traumatized people that have to spend therapy.
What about VeggieTales? You didn't mention VeggieTales.
Oh, that was like one of the only bright spots I can talk about from because it was the only time I ever heard God thinks you're special and he loves you very much, and not you're a worm and you're going to hell if you don't believe, and even if you do believe, you're still a worm because you're a worm.
I had never recognized that's why I liked VeggieTales. It was the positive message instead of the fire and brimstone, you're a terrible. That's it.
God made you special and he loves you very much.
Even though we're still so sweet about everything. I love VeggieTales.
I can still sing most of the songs. I make jokes about it to my kids and they don't get it because I didn't make them do that. And so they're like, what are you talking about? Never mind. Never mind. It's my trauma coming back. Don't worry about it.
Even Sunday Fridays was like, VeggieTales is like, it slaps. It's like the only good thing that comes out of this environment. Like,
the hairbrush. Where is my hairbrush? I still sing that song when I'm looking for a hairbrush.
My spouse did puppets in high school, and so they dubbed a lot of or lip sync to a lot of VeggieTales songs.
Oh.
He can still do all his puppets and his voices. And I live with VeggieTales every day, basically.
Do they still have that? I remember, was it the late 90s into the early 2000s? Somewhere in that time frame, they had started like a Christian satellite network where like it was all Christian programming. So like a lot of these, like Dove TV or something like that. And so a lot of these families would shut off their regular TV and only do that so that only Christian media could be in their house. Does that still exist?
I don't know when it was like a broadcast, but now there's PureFlix, which was created as a Christian competitor to Netflix. So PureFlix is where you can go for your children's TV shows. It's where you can go for your horrible Christian movies. I got a free subscription for a week once so I could show James one of the Left Behind movies because it's like so cringe. It's this combination of white Christian nationalism and violent anti-Semitism, and Tim LaHaye it's awful. Yeah, if you want to see some really bad movies, get PureFlix.
My grandparents are very much into. They figured out how to do YouTube very minimally. So they watch a lot of like John Hagee.
Oh my God.
Oh, he's a heretic. We can't do that. John Hagee's a heretic.
My grandma loves him so much.
I remember him standing there with the big chart behind him that he had drawn out with all his theory about the chosen people and all that stuff, and he would like go off talking about it and drawing stuff on his whiteboard. Intense.
Chuck Missler. So much Chuck Missler. Have you guys heard of him?
No.
I don't think I know him. Who's that?
I think he was like a professor or something, but he spends a lot of time like breaking down the Bible in like a quote unquote scientific way, scholarly way. Has a lot of like videos explaining things and how you can tell, like, I remember I block out most of it. There was like a part of the video where he was like, and you can tell somebody's an angel if they have 6 fingers on each hand, or they're like a Nephilim. Or I was like, what is happening?
Wow. Now, see, you guys are younger than me. I grew up with Jimmy Swaggart, Jim Baker, Tammy Faye. I love Tammy Faye.
The cult of Tammy Faye now, of all these people that are just like, she was actually like not the worst and was super kind. She's kind of like the VeggieTales. Like, she was a good thing to come out of this.
She was, and I liked her, and honestly, she had a big impact on my generation in deconstruction too, because I haven't been able to find it, but there was an interview. I don't remember who it was with, which is probably why I can't find it. where she said she found her, basically she found her salvation in makeup, right? Because she was raised very very strict, and women can't wear makeup. And so but that was basically the only safe way for her to express herself. And so she went with it, and she didn't care that she was the joke. Everybody was making jokes about her, and she didn't care that they were ridiculing her about that, because she had found this one way that she could safely express herself in this framework that she was having to live in. And so she did it unapologetically. And like, that was huge for
Have
girls.
you seen the movie Through the Eyes of
I
Candy?
have not seen it. I do want to see it.
I think it's on HBO
Okay.
Max. Yeah.
I'll look. I have
started it
HBO Max. I would look. Yes, because I do want to watch it, because that was a big deal. And I mean, for girls of my generation to hear, like, oh, maybe we don't have to follow every rule, right? So it plants the seed that eventually leads to the, oh, why are these rules here?
Yeah, she reminds me a lot of my Gigi, my grandma, who was raised Nazarene. Another kind of, as we're talking about these like mainline churches that are also like deeply fundamentalist, Nazarenes were very, and I'll always remember a conversation I had with her one day. She was telling me about her neighbor who was charismatic Pentecostal, and said something about like Gigi was something like, yeah, we knew they weren't like real Christians. She talked a lot about God's grace, and like, but now I wish the church had talked a lot more about God's grace. And you could just see her working through her own church trauma and how she could never measure up. And even though she never gave up her faith, she did what she was taught to do. She expressed herself in makeup and beauty, and was a kind, caring person with a little bit of Texas spice. But very much like Tammy Faye, like she had to find her own expression and execution of this.
The not real Christians thing. Oh my. That's I get so tired of hearing that. Those aren't real Christians. Christians don't act like this. No, clearly they do.
Well, even
right?
the Christian left, like progressive Christians, moderate Christians, will be like, well, those aren't real. I'm like, no, they very much are. They've been defining this movement for a very long time. Or y'all are part of the same religion, as much as you want to claim somebody else is responsible for their entire faith system too. You just have to understand that you have different beliefs. But this isn't about you. This is about understanding what's harmful.
Right. You don't get to define what they are and what they aren't. And I think it also it's part of that cyclical reasoning, though. We're the ones who got it right, and everybody else is wrong. So it reinforces that. So they don't feel the need to be responsible for the harm being caused by other people within their faith.
Exactly.
I also hate the everything happens for a reason and it's all God's will thing.
Yeah.
Because for one, it is, and it also removes accountability.
Yes.
I don't have any responsibility for my own actions if everything is just God's will and it must have been meant to happen that way.
Yeah. Which they tell you a lot when you are expressing pain from the church or you're trying to leave. There's a lot of conversations about, oh, people hurt people, but Jesus is there, or Jesus loves you, or you were just hurt by the church, which is full of sinful people. No one's perfect. Versus going, yeah, I have structural issues with like the accountability of the church. This isn't about one person. This is about the entire system of the way this operates.
See, that's where I started with deconstruction for the most part. Was I had issues with the structural setup and the organization and the power dynamic. So I stopped going to church. But then it took me several more years to be like, you know what, I don't actually believe any of this. First I moved into, okay, you know what, I'm more like Gnostic Christianity of old, I don't believe in the divinity of Christ, but he had some good teaching, that kind of thing. And it took me many steps to get there, because in the back of your mind, you're still hearing you're going to burn in hell if you don't believe this. And I've known a lot of people. There have been a lot of people in my family, we have boarding school and all of that, and a lot of trauma. Even with that trauma, there's a lot of them that will go back to church once they get older, they get ill, because they're still terrified that they're going to go to hell. So they got to go make right with, white Jesus, just in case.
Right.
Because that trauma is still there.
Yeah. Yeah, my parents decided that Thanksgiving Day was a really good time to text me and tell me that I was in danger of going to hell.
Oh, that was thoughtful.
It was really, yeah, we hadn't talked for about a month, and they decided that was the good day to tell me.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
This was part of a longer story. But, yeah, as far as telling people they're going to hell.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, it's still there. But I ultimately decided that being afraid of going to hell and then choosing something like Christianity or choosing to believe, that's just coercion. That's not safe. And that's what I had for a long time. And I really tried, but I could never believe. And I beat myself up over it for years. But it just, intellectually, I could understand what they were saying, but it just never felt real. So
I can't remember the first time I said that out loud. I wish I could, because I know it was hard. Like it took a long time to get there, because you are especially, because it's so fear based. It's the teachings and everything. It's so fear and shame based that it's really hard to get out of that and be willing to be like, okay, you know what? If I go to hell for this, that I'm fine with that. If if going to heaven means I have to be around you people, I don't want to be there. Like, I don't know.
And no one could ever give me a satisfactory explanation of heaven that was any better than loving my community here or working for good here. Like, I don't want to I want to stay here and breathe fresh air and help my neighbor.
Right. Did you ever watch the movie Black Snake Moan? There is a scene in there where the pastor comes out and he's talking to the character that's played by Christina Ricci, and she's asking about heaven and hell, and that's basically what he says. He says people focus too much on heaven, and we're not supposed to be doing good things just to try to do something up there. It's about what we're doing here, and and how we act here. And that really helped reframe a lot in my head. I'm like, you know what? I had been thinking of that for a very long time, but anytime you voice that to people within the church, you get told, no, that's works, not faith. And you have to have faith.
Right.
The whole thing, right? They gaslight you and say, like, no.
Can I tell you guys something funny that just happened?
What?
We were talking about that movie, and I got an email from Wicked Clothes that said, Satan loves you for who you are.
Oh, I need that.
Popped down my little notifications, and I was like, this is perfect timing.
Oh, that's amazing. I love Lucy.
Lucy loves us for who we are. That's all that matters.
Yes. Oh my goodness. There was something else I was going to bring up, but I can't remember. Oh, how old is the Earth?
I know.
Years old.
Well, I was trying to create a better answer, but the first thing in my head was 6,000 years. My parents still have Kent Hovind VHSs from the 1990s.
Oh, wow.
There was an Answers in Genesis conference at Tulsa Bible Church when I was about 11. And we actually had to leave the second day of the conference with Buddy Davis early to go to our Saturday afternoon Keepers at Home girls group that was an alternative to Girl Scouts where we learned homemaking skills.
Wow.
So I didn't get to finish my dinosaur clay structure.
That makes me sad for you.
It would have been a lot better than learning how to knit and wearing dresses around a bunch of other prepubescent girls who didn't really want to be there either.
You should make a dinosaur clay structure now.
Yes, make your own dinosaur. Oh, wow. So my dad had said, most of the people around us believed, the new Earth thing, right? But in his head, he couldn't reason this with the evidence, right? So he's like, so the Earth has to be older than actually 6,000 years. So in his head, he came up with this, that so a year is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years is as a day, right? So it wasn't 6 literal days. you know, and we are just trying to figure out things that are not our business, and we're just supposed to trust God.
Your dad
And
is
I'm like, wait a second, what?
Your dad is what they call an old earth creationist.
Right, that's where he ended up.
Yeah.
But it was hilarious. It was hilarious because I was like, okay, but now you're getting away from that whole fundamentalist thing of everything being literal. So is it literal or is it not literal? And he's like, you need to just go mind your business.
So one of my only friends in like junior high and high school, her dad had his own ministry called Jesus Created Ministries. You can still see their website if you Google it. Based in where was Turtleton, Oklahoma, near Manford. And they would every few weeks get a bus of Christian school kids, homeschool kids, churches, and they would go visit the Creation Museum. And he actually broke with Ken Ham and Answers in Genesis because they eventually hired a female scientist. And Clint did not believe that women should have any jobs or serve anybody but their husbands. And he just had to break with Answers in Genesis over this fundamental aspect of the Bible.
That makes me feel
Yeah.
So sexism was the
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. The whole like
wow.
stay-at-home daughter movement, he was really part of that. Like they're still at home.
Wow.
And there's a lot of emotional abuse there and even some amount of like physical abuse. And I just makes me angry. He makes me angry. To remember his influence just makes me angry.
You know, I've talked to Carrie about this before. Like, you know, we spent so much time in that, and even once I was grown, you know, I came back. I worked for the outreach for 10 years. I did I was Bible study teacher. It just started raining, so if y'all start hearing things, that's what that is. I'm recording it from my van, so we, you know, we did all of this, and I feel an immense weight about the harm that was done to the community by my family. Matter of fact, you mentioned Harry Potter earlier. The only reason I read the Harry Potter books was because I was the Bible study teacher and people were asking about it. Should they keep their kids from reading it? So I read the series in order to get my opinion on that. But
hey, that's true to most people who wrote books without ever reading them.
True, and that's what was my thing. I was hearing them talk on Christian radio about it, and I was hearing this. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to read this because I don't know, you know. Because going back to, you know, Dad always telling you, don't just follow what people say, find out for yourself. And then my aunt that I mentioned earlier, Wanda, she taught me to always study to prove yourself wrong. Well, you start with your assumption, and then you study to prove yourself wrong. And only if you cannot find any evidence against you can you believe your evidence is solid that supports you when it came to scripture, right? So in any event, in this whole process of this homestead I'm starting and all of this, one of the property that my son has ended up with living in was the building that was built for the outreach that was never finished. And so as we were cleaning it out, I discovered the library that I built and all of our literature for teaching Sunday school, all the extra Bibles that we used to hand out, all the literature that I made and printed for years and years, were all stored in this building. So I got to systematically go through and burn every bit of it. And it was very cathartic to be able to have that, like, the real tangible release of, you know, letting all of that go and, you know, doing the work in my community to help heal some of that harm that was caused.
Yeah, that's a big question to confront for a lot of people that have come out of this. You know, Joshua Harris is probably the most famous example to leave the faith and start his own deconstruction process, but the harm he created impacted millions of lives, and it's not over. Like I had medical issues because of purity culture and his contributions to it. And a lot of us do. Like the rates of vaginismus for women in evangelical communities is huge. Not to mention that a lot of those women are not straight like they were told they were, which is part of the contributing factor. So when Joshua Harris goes and tries to create a program to help people deconstruct, and it costs $250 a session, people are like, you're profiting off of the harm that you already did. This is not okay. And he took it down. And so that's very different than, you know, these small Sunday school teachers like you who are just following this tradition and path that you are already on. And then eventually you get on your own. But at the same time, like, confronting the harm that we do is really important. It is, I think, a part of like deconstructing in an honest way. Like, I got super into politics in 2008. I was a racist teenager. I listened to Rush Limbaugh. I thought that Mexican immigrants were here to get us all because that's what I was told. But I have to consider and remember the fact that I was a child, but also I'm still responsible for how I thought and felt at the time. And I have to call myself out for attitudes that were problematic and how they contribute to who I am today. And let that be a lens into how I love my community and the people around me and the people not around me even better. Because it's really hard to acknowledge that we have that capability to be so harmful. But obviously it's different since I'm a cis white woman. A lot of my harm has been social and from parallel peer relationships, but that doesn't mean it hasn't been harmful to people. And it doesn't mean I haven't said things in the past without knowing it that have really hurt the people that I care about.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being so open.
Thank you.
I know it's really hard.
Talking to me. I'm sorry if I like talked way too much. I still have this fear that
no, you were great.
Okay.
It was great. Thank you. We really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of the uploads, be sure to turn on those notifications so you will know as soon as those go up. Also, like us on social media at Hopoksia Podcast, or the easiest way is to go to our website, hopoksia.com. That's HOPOKSIA.com. And the links to all the socials and all the podcast feeds are right there. And we just want to thank you all for sharing your time with us, hanging out with us, and we hope to spend more time with you in the future.